The gunshot that killed Lucas Manning's wife didn't even wake the children, and that small mercy would haunt him for the rest of his days. He found Sarah slumped in the doorway of their farmhouse outside Watsonville, California, blood pooling beneath her cotton dress, her eyes already fixed on something he couldn't see. The outlaw who'd shot her was long gone, disappeared into the fog that rolled in thick from Monterey Bay on that November morning in 1878. They'd taken everything of value from the house, including the small lockbox containing 3 years of careful savings, leaving Lucas with 5 children under the age of 10 and not a single dollar to his name. The funeral was simple because it had to be. Lucas buried Sarah on the hillside overlooking their farmland, beneath an oak tree where she'd loved to sit and watch the sunset. The children stood beside him in their Sunday clothes, faces pale and confused. The oldest was Emma, 9 years old, with her mother's auburn hair and serious brown eyes. Then came the twins, Benjamin and William, 7 years old and identical in every way, except that Benjamin had a small scar on his chin from falling out of the wagon when he was 4. Little Grace was 5, clutching her rag doll so tightly her knuckles had gone white. And there was Thomas, barely 3, too young to understand why Mama wouldn't wake up. After the mourners left, mostly neighboring farmers and their wives bearing casseroles and sympathetic looks, Lucas sat on the porch steps and tried to figure out how he was going to feed 5 children with an empty larder, no money, and winter coming on fast. The farm had already been struggling. 2 seasons of poor rainfall had left the crops thin and scraggly, barely enough to keep them fed, let alone provide surplus to sell. Sarah had been taking in washing and mending to supplement their income, her nimble fingers working late into the night by lamplight. Now even that small income was gone. He sold the plow first, then the good saddle, then Sarah's china plates that had come all the way from Boston with her family 20 years ago. Each sale felt like cutting off a piece of himself, but the children needed to eat. Emma tried to help, taking over the cooking and cleaning with a determination that broke his heart. She was too young to carry such burdens, but she never complained, just set her small jaw and did what needed doing. By January, Lucas knew they couldn't make it through until spring. The farm was going to have to be sold, but even that wouldn't bring much given its condition and location. He'd heard there was work in town, manual labor jobs that paid by the day, but he couldn't leave the children alone on the farm all day, and he couldn't afford to hire someone to watch them. It was a problem with no solution, a trap closing tighter every day. That's when Anna Kowalski came into their lives like an answer to a prayer Lucas hadn't known how to pray. He'd gone into Watsonville to see about selling the wagon, thinking maybe he could get enough for it to buy food for another month. The general store was crowded that afternoon, farmers and their families stocking up on supplies, and Lucas had to wait his turn to speak with the proprietor. He was standing near the fabric section, hat in hand, when he heard a woman's voice speaking quietly but firmly. "I understand times are hard, Mr. Patterson, but I can do the work of any man in this store. I've kept books, managed inventory, dealt with suppliers. I'm asking for a fair wage for fair work, nothing more." Lucas glanced over and saw her then for the first time. She was tall for a woman, nearly 5'9", with honey blonde hair pulled back in a practical bun and gray eyes that held both intelligence and weariness. Her dress was well made but worn, carefully mended in several places, and her hands were folded calmly in front of her despite the tension in her shoulders. The store owner, a portly man with mutton chop sideburns, shook his head. "I'm sorry, Miss Kowalski, but I just don't have the position available right now. Maybe come back in spring when business picks up." It was a dismissal, polite but final, and Lucas saw something flicker across the woman's face before she schooled it back to neutral. She thanked Mr. Patterson graciously, turned and walked past Lucas toward the door. As she passed, he noticed the thin quality of her coat, inadequate for the January cold, and the careful way she carried herself, as if she were trying to take up as little space as possible in the world. He didn't know why he followed her out onto the wooden sidewalk. Maybe it was the defeated slope of her shoulders, or maybe it was simply that he recognized the look of someone who'd lost everything and was trying desperately to hold on to dignity. Whatever the reason, he found himself calling out, "Excuse me, miss." She turned, surprise evident on her face. Up close, he could see she was younger than he'd first thought, probably in her mid-20s, with a scattering of freckles across her nose and worry lines around her eyes that shouldn't have been there yet. "I couldn't help but overhear," Lucas said, suddenly uncertain what he'd meant to say. "You're looking for work?" "Yes, sir." Her voice was steady, professional. "I have experience in bookkeeping, household management, teaching, and general labor. I'm a hard worker and I learn quickly." Lucas found himself talking before he'd fully thought it through. "I have a farm about 5 miles outside town. My wife passed 2 months ago and I've got 5 children who need looking after. I can't pay much, barely anything really, but there's a roof and food such as it is. If you're willing to help mind the children while I try to find work, I'd be grateful for the assistance." He half expected her to refuse. It wasn't much of an offer after all, and she was a stranger to him as he was to her. But something in her expression shifted, softened, and when she spoke again, there was a note of relief in her voice. "When would you need me to start?" That's how Anna Kowalski came to live with the Manning family in their struggling farm outside Watsonville. Lucas learned her story in bits and pieces over the following weeks. She'd come to California from Illinois 3 years ago with her husband, a man named Joseph who'd had dreams of striking it rich in what remained of the gold rush territories. They'd settled in Sacramento first, but Joseph had caught pneumonia during the brutal winter of 1876 and died within a week, leaving Anna alone and nearly penniless in a city where she knew no one. She'd worked her way south, taking whatever job she could find, always moving when the work dried up or when employers decided a woman alone was either an easy target or a scandal waiting to happen. She'd been in Watsonville for 3 months, living in a boarding house that took most of her meager savings, trying to find steady employment that would allow her to settle somewhere, anywhere, and stop running. The children were wary of her at first. Emma especially watched Anna with suspicious eyes, as if this stranger might somehow be trying to replace their mother. But Anna had a gift for understanding what people needed without them having to say it. She didn't try to mother the children or force affection. Instead, she simply made herself useful, taking over the washing and mending, the cooking and cleaning, the endless small tasks that kept a household running. She was up before dawn every morning, stoking the fire and preparing breakfast, and she worked until long after the children were in bed. She never complained, never asked for anything beyond basic necessities, and she had a quiet competence that gradually began to ease the crushing weight on Lucas's shoulders. Within a week, even Emma had started to warm to her. It happened the day Anna found the girl crying behind the barn, clutching one of her mother's old aprons. Instead of offering empty platitudes, Anna had simply sat down beside Emma in the dirt and said, "Tell me about her." And Emma had. She'd talked for an hour about her mother, about how Sarah used to sing while she worked, about the stories she'd tell at bedtime, about how she'd always known just what to do when someone was hurt or scared or sad. Anna had listened to every word, and when Emma finally cried herself out, Anna had said, "She sounds like she was a wonderful mother." You're so lucky to have had her, even though it hurts terribly that she's gone." It was the right thing to say, acknowledging both the loss and the love. And from that moment, Emma became Anna's shadow, following her around the house and helping with chores, talking more than she had in the 2 months since Sarah's death. The twins were easier, accepting Anna with the resilient adaptability of 7-year-olds. They were fascinated by her height and her accent, which still carried traces of her Polish immigrant parents, and they peppered her with questions about Illinois and Sacramento, and all the places she traveled. Anna answered patiently, turning even mundane chores into opportunities for stories and learning. Little Grace attached herself to Anna with the swift totality of a 5-year-old's affection. Within 2 weeks, she was holding Anna's hand whenever possible and insisting on sitting next to her at meals. Thomas, the baby, was simply happy to have someone with arms to hold him and patience for his endless energy. Lucas watched this transformation with a mixture of gratitude and guilt. Anna was saving his family. He could see that clearly, and he was paying her almost nothing for it. He'd managed to find some day labor work in town, hauling freight and doing odd jobs that paid enough to keep them fed but not much more. Every penny went to food and basic necessities, with nothing left over for luxuries or savings or, God help him, a fair wage for Anna. He tried to talk to her about it one evening after the children were in bed. They were sitting at the kitchen table, Anna mending one of William's shirts by lamplight while Lucas worked on fixing a broken chair leg. "I know this isn't what you hoped for when you came here," he said, not quite meeting her eyes. "You're working harder than anyone should have to, and I'm not paying you near what you're worth. If you wanted to leave, find something better, I'd understand." Anna set down her needle and thread, considering him with those clear gray eyes. "Do you want me to leave?" "No," he said immediately, then felt his face flush. "No, of course not. The children, they've come to depend on you. You've been a blessing to this family, Miss Kowalski. I just want you to know that you don't owe us anything. You came here looking for work, not charity cases." A small smile touched her lips, the first real smile he'd seen from her. "Mr. Manning, I've spent 3 years looking for a place to belong. I've worked in houses where I was treated like furniture, shops where I was tolerated but not trusted, and one memorable position where the man of the house seemed to think my wages included liberties I had no intention of granting. This farm, this family, you've given me something I haven't had since Joseph died. A home. That's worth more than money." Lucas felt something shift in his chest, a warmth he hadn't experienced since Sarah's death. He looked at Anna properly then, really seeing her for the first time. She was beautiful, he realized with a start. Not in the delicate, fragile way Sarah had been beautiful, but in a strong, capable way that spoke of resilience and determination. Her hands, rough from work, moved with grace as she picked up her mending again. Her profile in the lamplight showed the clean lines of her face, the determined set of her chin. He looked away quickly, guilt flooding through him. Sarah had only been gone 2 months. It was too soon to be noticing other women, too soon to be feeling anything beyond grief and responsibility. He focused on the chair leg with renewed intensity, trying to ignore the awareness of Anna's presence that had suddenly become impossible to shake. The weeks passed, winter slowly giving way to early spring. The fog that had blanketed the valley began to lift more frequently, revealing clear blue skies and the promise of warmer days ahead. Lucas found more consistent work as a ranch hand on a large property north of town, working cattle and mending fences for a wage that finally allowed them to start rebuilding their reserves. Anna transformed the house from a place of survival into a home again. She planted a kitchen garden, coaxing vegetables from the stubborn California soil. She taught Emma to read better, worked with the twins on their letters and numbers, and somehow found time to make new clothes for the children from fabric she'd bought with the tiny wages Lucas insisted on paying her. They developed routines, the six of them, falling into patterns that felt almost natural. Breakfast together before Lucas left for work, Anna and Emma managing the household while the boys did chores and the little ones played. Dinner together in the evening, everyone sharing stories from their day. The older children doing lessons after dinner, while Thomas played with his wooden blocks, and Grace helped Anna with the dishes. It felt like a family, and that both comforted and terrified Lucas. He found himself looking forward to coming home in the evenings, not just to see the children but to see Anna as well. He noticed small things about her, the way she hummed while she worked, always slightly off-key, the way she listened with her whole attention when someone was speaking, the way she never lost her patience, even when Thomas was being particularly difficult or the twins were fighting or Emma was having one of her sad days. He noticed, too, the way she looked at him sometimes when she thought he wasn't paying attention. There was something in her expression that made his heart beat faster, a softness that suggested her feelings might be developing along the same confusing lines as his own. It was late March when things changed between them, a warm Saturday afternoon when Lucas had the day off from the ranch. He'd been working on repairing the barn roof, a job he'd been putting off all winter, when he'd lost his footing on the ladder and fallen 8 feet to the ground. He landed hard, the breath knocked out of him, his left wrist taking the brunt of the impact. Anna had been in the garden with Grace when she heard the crash. She came running, Grace at her heels, and found Lucas sitting in the dirt trying to catch his breath, his face pale and his wrist already starting to swell. "Don't move," she said, kneeling beside him with swift efficiency. Her hands moved over him carefully, checking for injuries, her touch gentle but competent. "Can you breathe? Does anything feel broken?" "Just my wrist, I think," he managed, wincing as she probed the injury carefully. "And maybe my pride." "Grace, run get me some clean cloth from the kitchen and the bottle of willow bark tincture from the shelf above the stove," Anna said calmly. The little girl ran off immediately, and Anna helped Lucas to his feet, supporting him with surprising strength as she guided him toward the house. "You're lucky you didn't break your neck." "I've survived worse," he said, then immediately regretted it when he saw the expression on her face. "That doesn't mean you should be careless with your life, Lucas Manning," she said, and it was the first time she'd used his given name. "Those children in there need you. You can't afford to take foolish risks." She was right, of course, and he told her so as she settled him at the kitchen table and began wrapping his wrist with expert precision. Grace had returned with the supplies, and Anna measured out a careful dose of the tincture, mixing it with water and handing it to him. "How do you know all this?" he asked, watching her work. "The doctoring, I mean." "My mother was a midwife back in Illinois," Anna said, tying off the bandage. "I helped her from the time I was old enough to follow instructions. I've set broken bones, delivered babies, and nursed people through every illness you can imagine. It was useful knowledge when Joseph and I were traveling. Doctors aren't always available, especially not for people with limited funds." She finished with his wrist and looked up, and suddenly, Lucas was very aware of how close she was, kneeling beside his chair, her face level with his. He could see the flecks of darker gray in her eyes, smell the faint scent of lavender soap on her skin, feel the warmth of her breath. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For everything, not just this. For being here, for helping us. I don't know what we would have done without you." Something flickered in her expression, vulnerability showing through her usual composure. I don't know what I would have done without all of you either, she said softly. I was so tired of being alone, Lucas, so tired of wandering. When you offered me a place here, it felt like coming home after a very long journey. He reached out with his good hand, cupping her cheek before he could think better of it. She leaned into his touch, her eyes closing briefly, and when she opened them again, he saw his own feelings reflected there. Want and fear and guilt and hope, all tangled together in a way that made his chest ache. Sarah's only been gone 4 months, he said, voicing the concern that had been haunting him. Is it wrong that I feel this way about you? Is it too soon? Anna covered his hand with hers, pressing it more firmly against her face. I don't know, she admitted. I don't know what the rules are for this kind of thing, but I know that grief isn't something you can schedule or control. And I know that feeling alive again, feeling hopeful again, that doesn't dishonor the people we've lost. It honors them by proving that the love they gave us made us strong enough to love again. It was wise and kind and exactly what he needed to hear. Lucas leaned forward, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. And when she didn't, he pressed his lips to hers in a kiss that felt like a beginning and a promise and a question all at once. She kissed him back, her hand coming up to thread through his hair. And for a moment the kitchen faded away until there was nothing but the two of them and the undeniable connection sparking between them. When they finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Lucas rested his forehead against hers. I'm falling in love with you, Anna Kowalski, he said, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. I didn't mean to, didn't plan on it, but there it is. You've brought light back into this house, back into my life. You and your 2 hands that have helped us more than I can ever repay. Anna laughed, a soft, joyful sound he'd never heard from her before. And you, Lucas Manning, you and those 5 children have given me a reason to stop running. A reason to build something instead of just surviving. I'm falling in love with you too, with all of you. This whole complicated, messy, beautiful family. They were interrupted by the sound of small feet running through the house. Thomas burst into the kitchen, followed closely by Benjamin and William, all 3 boys covered in mud from playing by the creek. They skidded to a stop when they saw Lucas and Anna, still closed together, and identical grins spread across the twins' faces. Papa's got a sweetheart, Benjamin announced with 7-year-old glee. Papa's going to marry Miss Anna, William added, as if it were a foregone conclusion. Thomas, not to be left out, ran up and wrapped his muddy arms around Anna's legs. Mama Anna, he said happily, the words clear despite his baby lisp. Anna looked at Lucas, her eyes suddenly bright with tears. He saw the question there, the fear that maybe the children wouldn't accept this, wouldn't accept her as anything more than a hired helper. But before he could say anything, Emma appeared in the doorway, Grace at her side. The 9-year-old took in the scene with her serious eyes, her mother's eyes, and Lucas waited with his heart in his throat to see how she would react. Emma had loved Sarah so deeply, had mourned her so hard. Would she see this as a betrayal? But then Emma walked forward, her expression thoughtful, and looked between Lucas and Anna with an adult wisdom that seemed far beyond her years. Mama would have liked you, she said to Anna. She always said the best people were the ones who helped without being asked, who gave without expecting anything back. That's you, Miss Anna. You've been helping us all along, even though we had nothing to give you. You gave me a family, Anna said, her voice thick with emotion. That's everything. Emma nodded, seeming satisfied with this answer, and then she did something that made Lucas's eyes sting with tears. She walked forward and wrapped her arms around Anna's waist, hugging her tightly. Then I'm glad Papa loves you, she said simply. We all need someone to love us. After that, things moved quickly. Lucas proposed properly a week later on a Sunday afternoon when they walked up to Sarah's grave together. He'd been worried about doing it there, worried it might seem disrespectful, but Anna had suggested it herself. "She was part of your life, part of what made you who you are," Anna had said. "I'm not trying to replace her or erase her. Those children upstairs are proof that she existed, that she loved and was loved. I want to honor that, not ignore it." So they stood together under the oak tree, and Lucas told Sarah about Anna, about how she'd saved them all, about how she'd brought hope back into their lives. And then he turned to Anna and asked her to marry him properly, with a ring he'd bought using money from selling the last of Sarah's jewelry, knowing somehow that Sarah would have approved. Anna said yes, tears streaming down her face, and they held each other while the California sun set over the hills, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink and purple. They were married a month later in the small church in Watsonville, with the 5 children standing up with them and half the town in attendance. Lucas wore his Sunday suit, carefully brushed and pressed, and Anna wore a dress of pale blue cotton that Emma and Grace had helped her sew, with wildflowers in her hair that the twins had picked that morning. The ceremony was simple, but deeply felt. When the Reverend asked if Lucas took Anna to be his wife, his voice was steady and sure as he said, "I do, with all my heart." And when Anna promised to love and honor him, to be a mother to his children and a partner in all things, there wasn't a dry eye in the church. The children stood with them, part of the ceremony, part of the promises being made. Emma held Thomas's hand to keep him still, while Grace clutched her flower bouquet and the twins tried their best to look serious and grown up. They were a family, made not just by blood but by choice, by love, by the simple act of showing up for each other day after day. The reception was held at the farm, neighbors bringing food and music, turning the struggling property into a place of celebration. Lucas danced with his new wife in the yard while the children ran wild with the other young ones, their laughter carrying on the spring breeze. He held Anna close, marveling at how much had changed in just a few short months, how much had been rebuilt from the ruins of loss. "Happy?" he asked, spinning her under his arm. "Happier than I thought possible," she admitted, her face glowing. 6 months ago I was alone and desperate, certain I'd never find a place to belong. And now I have a husband, 5 children, a home. It feels like a dream." "It's real," he assured her, pulling her close again. "As real as those 5 mouths to feed and your 2 hands that somehow managed to take care of all of us. We're your family now, Anna Manning. For better or worse, richer or poorer, all of it." She kissed him then, not caring who was watching, and Lucas kissed her back with all the love and gratitude and hope that filled his chest. They'd both lost everything, had both been broken by circumstances beyond their control. But they'd found each other, and in finding each other had discovered that sometimes the best families are the ones you build from scratch, with love and hard work and stubborn determination. The farm began to thrive under their combined efforts. Lucas's steady work at the ranch brought in reliable income, while Anna's management of the household and her expanded kitchen garden provided much of what they needed to survive. She sold excess vegetables in town, and her skill with needle and thread meant she could take in mending work during the quiet winter months. More than that, though, Anna brought order and efficiency to everything she touched. She kept careful accounts of their income and expenses, finding ways to stretch every dollar. She bartered with neighbors, trading her excess tomatoes for their extra eggs, her sewing skills for their husbands' help with heavy repairs. She turned their struggling farm into a productive homestead through sheer determination and intelligence. The children flourished under her care. Emma grew into a capable young woman, learning everything Anna could teach her about running a household, about standing strong in the face of hardship, about finding joy even in difficult circumstances. The twins became her willing helpers, doing chores without complaint and showing the first signs of the strong men they'd grow into. Grace and Thomas knew no other mother than Anna, calling her Mama with easy affection that made her eyes shine every time. As spring turned to summer and summer to fall, Lucas found himself falling more deeply in love with his wife. He loved watching her with the children, her patience never ending even when Thomas was being particularly trying or the twins were fighting again. He loved her competence, the way she could solve problems with calm efficiency. He loved her strength, physical and mental, the way she never backed down from a challenge. But he also loved her softness, visible only in private moments. The way she curled against him at night, her head on his chest, speaking quietly about her dreams for their future. The way she laughed at his terrible jokes, genuine amusement lighting up her face. The way she sometimes got a faraway look in her eyes when she thought no one was watching, remembering Joseph perhaps, or her parents back in Illinois, or all the hard roads she'd walked before finding her way to them. One evening in October, almost a year after Sarah's death, Lucas found Anna standing on the hillside near Sarah's grave, looking out over the valley below. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the land, and Anna had her arms wrapped around herself against the evening chill. He came up behind her, draping his coat over her shoulders, and she leaned back against him with a sigh. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the light fade from the sky. "You ever regret it?" she asked finally. "Asking me to stay?" "Sometimes I wonder if you wished you'd had more time to grieve before taking on a new wife." Lucas turned her in his arms so he could see her face. "I regret nothing about you, Anna Manning," he said firmly. "You saved us, not just practically, though God knows we needed that, but emotionally, spiritually. You reminded us that life goes on, that there's still beauty and joy to be found even after terrible loss. Sarah would have loved you for that, for taking care of her babies when she couldn't." Anna blinked back tears. "I hope so. I think about her sometimes, wonder what she was like, wish I could have known her. She made you who you are, made those beautiful children. I owe her everything." "She was good and kind and gentle," Lucas said. "She loved easily and deeply. And yes, she made me who I am, gave me those children, built a life with me. But you, Anna, you taught me that the heart has room for more than one love, that moving forward doesn't mean forgetting. You taught all of us that family is about showing up, about doing the work, about choosing each other every single day." They walked back to the house hand in hand as darkness fell, the lights from the windows glowing warm and welcoming. Inside, Emma was helping the twins with their schoolwork while Grace played with her doll and Thomas built towers with his blocks. It was a scene of perfect domestic peace, hard-won and deeply treasured. That night, after the children were asleep, Anna told Lucas she was pregnant. He felt joy surge through him, immediate and powerful, followed quickly by a flicker of guilt that he pushed firmly aside. This child would be his and Anna's together, a symbol of their new life, their new family. It didn't diminish what he'd had with Sarah, it simply proved that he was capable of building something new. "A baby," he said wonderingly, placing his hand on her still flat belly. "When?" "Late spring, I think, May or June." She covered his hand with hers, her expression hopeful and nervous. "Are you happy? I know 5 children is already a lot to handle." "I'm overjoyed," he assured her, kissing her deeply. "This baby is a blessing, Anna, a gift, just like you've been a gift to all of us." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the winter months. Anna continued working as she always had, though Lucas and Emma both tried to get her to rest more. The children were excited about the new baby, especially Grace and Thomas, who'd never had a younger sibling before. Emma was particularly attentive, helping Anna with the heavy work, making sure she ate enough, worrying over her with an almost maternal concern that made both Lucas and Anna smile. The girl had grown so much in the past year, becoming more confident and capable, no longer carrying the weight of grief that had bowed her shoulders the previous winter. The twins were convinced the baby would be a boy, already making plans to teach him all the important skills like fishing and climbing trees and catching frogs. Grace hoped for a girl, someone to play dolls with, while Thomas was simply excited about not being the baby of the family anymore. Spring arrived with warm sunshine and blooming wildflowers, and Anna's belly grew round and prominent. She moved more slowly now but never stopped moving, always finding tasks that needed doing, meals that needed cooking, children that needed tending. The baby came on a warm day in late May, arriving with the kind of speed that left everyone slightly stunned. Anna had been hanging laundry when her water broke, and by the time Lucas got her inside and sent Benjamin racing to town for the doctor, the contractions were already coming fast and hard. Emma stepped up with a maturity beyond her 10 years, boiling water and gathering clean linens, keeping the younger children occupied in the other room while Anna labored. The doctor arrived just in time to catch the baby as it emerged, a squalling, red-faced infant with a surprisingly loud voice. "It's a boy," the doctor announced, cleaning the baby and wrapping him in a blanket before handing him to Anna. "Healthy lungs on this one, that's for certain." Lucas looked down at his new son, at Anna's exhausted, radiant face, and felt his heart expand impossibly larger. The baby had Anna's nose and a shock of dark hair, and when he opened his eyes they were a deep blue that might turn gray or brown or stay blue forever. "What should we name him?" Anna asked, stroking the baby's cheek with gentle fingers. Lucas thought about names and meanings and legacies. "What about Joseph, after your first husband, and Samuel for a middle name after my father?" Anna's eyes filled with tears. "You do that. Honor Joseph that way. He was part of making you who you are," Lucas said. "Just like Sarah was part of making me. This baby is a blend of both our histories, both our loves. It seems right to acknowledge that." So Joseph Samuel Manning joined the family, welcomed with joy by his 5 older siblings. Emma was entranced by him, helping Anna with feeding and changing and all the endless tasks that came with a newborn. The twins were surprisingly gentle, taking turns holding him carefully on the sofa while Anna supervised. Grace sang him songs and showed him her doll, explaining in great detail how to take care of babies. Thomas was less impressed, mostly concerned with whether the baby could play with his blocks yet. The farm continued to prosper. Lucas had been promoted to foreman at the ranch where he worked, a position that came with better pay and a small bonus. They were able to make real repairs to the house, to buy better furniture and warmer blankets and new clothes for the children instead of hand-me-downs and mended cast-offs. Anna's garden expanded, and she started raising chickens for eggs and meat. She became known in Watsonville as a woman who could fix anything, solve any problem, and her reputation brought occasional work helping other families with bookkeeping or household management. Every bit of money went toward building their future, toward ensuring the children would have opportunities Lucas and Anna had never had. Little Joseph grew into a happy, healthy baby, adored by his entire family. He learned to smile and laugh and eventually to crawl, exploring the farmhouse with determined curiosity while his siblings watched over him with protective devotion. On their 2nd anniversary, Lucas took Anna back to the church where they'd been married. They renewed their vows privately, just the 2 of them and the reverend, reaffirming the promises they'd made and adding new ones forged from 2 years of building a life together. "I promise to keep choosing you every day for the rest of my life," Lucas said, holding both her hands in his. "I promise to honor your strength and support you when you're weak. I promise to be a good father to all our children, the ones you birthed and the ones you've embraced as your own. I promise to love you with everything I have, for as long as I breathe." Anna smiled through her tears. "I promise to keep being the best partner I can be, to work beside you in all things. I promise to love those 5 children as fiercely as I love Joseph, to never make distinctions between them. I promise to remind you of your worth when you forget, to stand by your side through whatever comes. I promise to love you with my whole heart, now and always." They sealed the promises with a kiss, and when they returned to the farm, they found the children had worked with a neighbor to prepare a surprise celebration. There was a cake that Emma had baked herself, slightly lopsided but delicious, and wildflowers everywhere, and drawings from Grace and Thomas decorating the walls. That night, after everyone else was asleep, Lucas and Anna sat on the porch in the warm June darkness, listening to the crickets and watching the stars wheel overhead. Joseph was asleep in Anna's arms, a warm, contented weight, and Lucas had his arm around her shoulders. "2 years ago, I thought my life was over," Lucas said quietly. "I'd lost Sarah, lost our savings, had 5 children to feed and no idea how to manage it. I was drowning, Anna, going down for the 3rd time. 2 years ago, I was so tired of fighting," Anna replied. "Tired of being alone, tired of having no place to belong. When you offered me that job, I almost didn't take it. I was scared it would be like all the others, temporary and disappointing." "Best decision we ever made, saying yes to each other," Lucas said. He kissed the top of her head. "You came into our lives with just your 2 hands and a willingness to help, and you changed everything. You took 6 broken people and helped us become a family again." "You did the same for me," Anna insisted. "You and those 5 mouths to feed, you gave me purpose and love and a reason to stop running. We saved each other, Lucas. That's what partners do." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the night, secure in each other and in the family they'd built. The future stretched out before them, full of promise and possibility, and they would face it together as they'd faced everything else with determination, with love, and with the unshakable certainty that they belonged to each other. The years that followed were good ones, marked by the normal joys and challenges of raising a large family. Emma grew into a beautiful young woman, smart and capable, eventually marrying a young man from town who worked as a schoolteacher. Lucas walked her down the aisle with pride and tears, watching his oldest daughter start her own family with the same fierce love that had sustained them all. The twins became strong, reliable young men, working the ranch alongside their father and eventually buying a small piece of land of their own to farm. They married sisters from a neighboring family, causing much amusement at the combined wedding ceremony, and built houses within sight of each other, maintaining the closeness they'd always shared. Grace developed a passion for teaching, inspired by her stepmother's patient lessons, and went to college in San Francisco to get her teaching certificate. She returned to Watsonville to teach at the local school, eventually becoming headmistress and earning a reputation as one of the finest educators in the county. Thomas grew up loving the land, staying on the family farm and eventually taking it over when Lucas retired. He married a girl from a nearby town, and they had 4 children who ran wild over the same hills Lucas and Anna had worked so hard to make productive. Little Joseph grew up never knowing anything but a loving, secure home. He was bright and curious, eventually becoming a lawyer, the first in the family to pursue such a profession. He used his education to help other families like theirs, people struggling against circumstance, trying to build something from nothing. Anna and Lucas aged together, silver threading through their hair, lines deepening around their eyes and mouths. They added 3 more children to their family over the years, 2 daughters and another son, each one welcomed with the same joy as Joseph had been. The house was always full of noise and activity, children and grandchildren coming and going, the legacy of their love spreading outward in ever-widening circles. On their 20th anniversary, the whole family gathered at the farm for a massive celebration. There were dozens of people now, children and grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren, all descended from or connected to Lucas and Anna's decision to take a chance on each other that winter day in 1879. Lucas stood to make a speech, Anna beside him, and looked out at the sea of faces, each one precious and known. 20 years ago, he began, his voice still strong despite his age, I lost everything. My wife, my savings, my hope. I had 5 children who needed me and no idea how to provide for them. I was at the end of my rope, ready to give up. He turned to Anna, taking her hand. And then this woman walked into my life. She'd lost everything too, was wandering and alone, looking for a place to belong. She came to us with nothing but her 2 hands and a willingness to work, and she saved us. She took our broken family and helped make it whole. She loved my children as her own, worked beside me to build this farm, this life, this future. Anna squeezed his hand, her eyes bright. And you gave me a home, she said, her voice carrying clearly in the sudden silence. You and those 5 children, you gave me purpose and family and love. We saved each other, built something beautiful from the ashes of our losses. Every single person here tonight is proof that love is stronger than loss, that families can be built through choice as much as blood, that 2 people with nothing can create everything. The family burst into applause, and Lucas kissed his wife, the woman who'd shared his life for 2 decades, who'd given him children and grandchildren, who'd stood beside him through drought and abundance, sickness and health, sorrow and joy. She kissed him back, and in that moment, they were transported back to that first kiss in the kitchen, when everything had been uncertain and new and frightening. But they'd taken the risk, had chosen love despite the fear, and it had given them a legacy of family, a life well lived, a love story that would be told to their grandchildren and great-grandchildren for generations to come. They danced that night under the stars, surrounded by their enormous, complicated, beautiful family. Lucas held Anna close, marveling as he always did at how lucky he'd been, how close he'd come to missing this, missing her, missing everything that mattered. Still happy. He asked, echoing the question he'd asked on their wedding day. Happier than I ever dreamed possible, Anna replied, resting her head on his shoulder. We've built something remarkable, you and I. A family, a legacy, a love that will outlast us both. I love you, Anna Manning, Lucas said, the words as true and heartfelt as the first time he'd spoken them. You saved my life in every way a person can be saved. I love you too, Lucas Manning, Anna replied. You gave me a home in every sense of the word. You and those 5 mouths to feed, and all the mouths that came after. You're my whole world, my whole heart. They danced on as the moon rose high and the music played and their family celebrated around them. 2 people who'd lost everything had found each other and built something that would last for generations. It was a love story forged in hardship and sealed with determination, a testament to the power of choosing hope over despair, love over fear, together over alone. The years continued their inevitable march forward, bringing more changes, more joys, more sorrows. But through it all, Lucas and Anna faced everything hand in hand, two partners who'd found each other at the darkest moment and chosen to build toward the light. They lived long, full lives, seeing their children succeed and their grandchildren grow. They watched the farm they'd saved together become a prosperous homestead, a gathering place for the sprawling family tree that had grown from their union. They grew old together with grace and humor, never taking for granted the gift they'd been given in finding each other. When Lucas died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78, Anna held his hand and whispered her love one last time. She mourned him deeply, but not hopelessly, secure in the knowledge that they'd had 42 years together, that they'd built something that would endure long after they were both gone. She lived another 5 years, a beloved matriarch surrounded by children and grandchildren who revered her strength and wisdom. When she finally joined Lucas in death, the funeral was attended by over 100 people, all of them touched in some way by her kindness, her determination, her willingness to help anyone who needed it. They buried her next to Lucas on the hillside overlooking the farm, under the oak tree where Sarah had once been laid to rest. The three of them together now, part of the land they'd worked, part of the legacy they'd created. On Anna's headstone, beneath her name and dates, her children had inscribed a simple truth that captured her entire life. She had 2 hands ready to help, and with them she built a family, a home, and a love that will never die. And so their story ended as all stories must, with death and memory and the continuation of life through the generations they'd created. But it was a good ending, a happy ending, a closed chapter that left no questions unanswered, no promises unfulfilled. Lucas Manning had lost everything and had 5 mouths to feed. Anna Kowalski had lost everything and had 2 hands ready to help. Together they'd built something remarkable from nothing, proving that sometimes the greatest love stories are the ones born from desperation and determination, from the simple act of showing up for each other day after day, year after year, building a life one small decision at a time. Their children told their story to their own children, and those children told it to theirs, passing down the legacy of 2 people who refused to give up even when everything seemed hopeless. It became a family legend, a reminder that love can bloom in the most unexpected places, that families are built through choice and commitment as much as blood, that 2 people willing to work together can overcome anything. The farm remained in the family for generations, each successive owner maintaining it with pride, remembering the grandfather and grandmother who'd saved it from ruin through sheer determination and love. The house was expanded and modernized over the years, but the original structure remained, a testament to Lucas and Anna's stubborn refusal to let go of their dreams. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the fog rolled in from Monterey Bay, people swore they could see 2 figures walking hand in hand on the hillside, looking out over the valley they'd called home. Whether it was truly their spirits or simply the power of their memory made manifest, no one could say. But everyone agreed on one thing. Lucas and Anna Manning had lived a love story for the ages, and their legacy would continue as long as there was family left to remember them. In the end, that's what mattered most, not the hardships they'd faced or the losses they'd endured, but the love they'd built and the family they'd created. They'd started with nothing and created everything, proving that the most powerful force in the world isn't money or status or luck, but simple human determination to keep loving, keep fighting, keep showing up for the people who matter most. Their story was complete, their promises kept, their love immortalized in the lives of everyone they'd touched. And if there was any justice in the universe, they were together still, dancing under the stars for all eternity, Two souls who'd found each other against all odds and refused to ever let go.